Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Leaders in Sustainability Roundtable here at the ITP Media HQ. It's a really big pleasure for us at Construction Week and Oil and Gas Middle East to be hosting experts in the field of oil and gas and construction. So before we dive right into the conversations that we're having today, let's first hear a short introduction from each of the speakers here at the table, starting from Paul.
Good morning, my name is Paul Miller. I'm a branch director in Omnium International. We're a cost consultancy firm, experts in construction, and I have a master's in green building.
Right, Ahmed.
Thank you. I'm Ahmed Labeeb. I'm Sustainability Energy Manager, and I'm working for KO International Consultants. So COP28 and energy is my field. I am net zero specialist, and we are working on استدامة lead. So we will discuss it later on.
He's the expert. My name is Sameh Muhtadi. I'm CEO of RAC Properties, one of the leading real estate development companies in Ras Al Khaimah. Throughout my career, I've worked in both real estate development and contracting, so I have a bit of exposure to both sides of the formula.
Amazing, thank you. Gediz?
Hello, my name is Gediz. I'm the managing partner of Mundo Verde Climate. We are a climate finance and climate change risk management advisory company.
Hi everybody. First of all, thank you for having us here. Construction Week, Oil and Gas Middle East, Dean and Julianne. Appreciate the time. My name is Guillermo. I run energy transition strategy and investments for Nabors, one of the largest land drilling company in the world. And by way of background, I'm an investment banker by trade, but primarily focused on M&A in energy. But over the last few years, we've been building our franchise around energy transition, our group of investments, not only corporate venture side, but also a series of public vehicles to affect our strategy. So
Perfect.
Look
Thank
forward
you so
to talking
much.
about this.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. So I think there's a lot of conversation happening now with the COP only a few days away. It's the biggest event of the year in terms of sustainability. And I think both industries, oil and gas and construction, have a lot of say when it comes to what are the different things that are happening in the industry and what can be talked about and what we can put the spotlight on. So I think I'll pass it on over to you, Dean, to start the conversation on how oil and gas and renewables are involved in this and what they can be doing.
Thank you, Julianne. I'm Dean Mikkelsen. I'm the editor of Oil and Gas Middle East, and I want to thank you all for participating today. So let me begin with my general questions to Guillermo and Gediz. So, Guillermo, how is your company actively incorporating renewable energy sources and sustainable practices into your operations to support this green revolution?
So first of all, it's fundamentally a matter of long-term survival and growth to spend capital, time, energy, and resources in figuring out not only ways to thoughtfully invest into those energy sources of the future, if you will, which we are doing by virtue of having two kind of capital structures focused on figuring out how to make some of those strategic investments. In addition, as you can imagine, we are spending enormous amount of time and effort internally to thinking about how to decarbonize the oil field, right? How do you hybridize our engines? How do you inject hydrogen into a diesel engine to increase its efficiency and reduce its emissions? How do you think about highline power connecting our rigs into the grid? How do you support some of those investments that we're making from a corporate venture standpoint to help them scale and grow? Because as we've developed this strategy, we are our corporate venture group is effectively focused on making some of those investments that we think are in that engineering risk point, getting close to scale up capacity. And how do we use who we are, our tools, our engineering capacity, our resources, our expertise, our people, our team, our automation, AI, robotics, manufacturing capacity. How do we use who we are today to enhance some of those investments over time, right? So that's my job, but that's also kind of what we are spending an enormous amount of effort and time into, because like I was saying earlier, over time, maybe not 10 years from now, I don't know if it's 10, 15, 20, 50 years, I don't know when it is, but it's a matter of survival, right? Ultimately, humanity needs too much energy distributed across more people, more land, faster, more mobile than any time before. And, this is core to who we are as an energy technology business, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Thank you. And Gediz, how do you encourage companies to go towards this energy transition with partnerships, or what other aspects can they work towards energy transition?
So actually, Mundo Verde Climate takes an active role in mobilizing finance towards new climate mitigation technologies. And renewable energy has always been the usual suspect there. And as we call that low-hanging fruits, we had hydro, wind, and solar power technologies past 15 years. And as Mundo Verde, we have verified more than 50 million tons of emission reduction credits. And by certifying and trading them in different markets, we mobilize finance towards these technologies. And right now, of course, those technologies continue, especially in Africa. Most of those projects are still not bankable. They need the support of carbon finance, and we continue to do that. However, everywhere around the world, we need support of carbon finance towards new technologies, which are not really low-hanging fruits anymore. Hydrogen is one of them. And we need to certify more credits from these projects. We need to adopt new methodologies for developing carbon assets and mobilizing finance towards these new technologies. And of course, that's not it, because we have also the methane removal. Methane is a very strong greenhouse gas. It is almost 25 times stronger than carbon dioxide. And to reach the goals of Paris Agreement, we need to reduce the methane imminently and by 2030. So we are now focusing on biogas and landfill gas projects. We are also creating carbon assets from those projects and mobilizing finance towards methane removal technologies as well.
As you both have a finance background, how do you move towards this carbon credit, encouraging companies to invest in it? The government, is a government push, or is it through the companies doing it themselves, individually in countries? How do we get this financing of energy transition happening?
I'm happy to start. Look, it's hard, right? Unlike technology, software-driven technology, energy in scale, hardware deployment in scale requires that big first of a kind, that second of a kind, those type of things that are not precisely cheap. The feedback circle on technologies like this is also longer. It takes more capital to try things for the first time. That's a challenge, right? And that's why, to us, what's probably the most important, and this is part of why we're part of this, why we're hope the likes of Lamberger, Baker Hughes, all of the participants in the traditional energy complex, if you will, and their ability to help scale some of these new technologies and ideas is because we need to support all of these small ideas, all of these small companies, all of these great new technologies. They will need the support of the bigger guys that know how to do these things in scale. They can try projects and take some risk on it, right? Not everything is going to work, but what I do know, though, is energy transition is large enough that almost anything we can throw at it, we should, to some extent. Yeah. And so that's my view, right? It's about bringing the strategic participants into the capital stack of those venture companies early on, and help them support so that financials can start actually investing over time and helping some of these things scale over time. If that makes sense to you, Dina.
As Mundo Verde, we are very active in voluntary carbon markets and compliance markets, but the voluntary carbon markets have been growing very fast past 5 years, and it is very important to put a price on carbon so that we can mobilize finance towards these technologies. But we also need a solid and higher carbon price, because the more advanced the technologies are, the more finance we need. And because the bankability of those projects, new expensive technologies, is really going down. So that's why we actually emphasize the importance of carbon price and a solid, reliable carbon price with markets, project-based markets linked everywhere in the world that leads to a global carbon price at the end. All the more important, actually identifying those projects and making sure that those projects can access carbon finance and other types of climate finance early enough. That's really the key, because we know that the technology has always been on our side. The cost of solar power has diminished by 500% past 10 years, and that's a good sign. And we know that the technology will be on our side, but we need to identify those technologies, make sure that we have the methodologies to assess the amount of carbon reduction, carbon removal from those technologies, and then we can develop those carbon assets ex ante so that those technologies can actually use the advantage of carbon finance early enough. Because for scaling up, we need to diversify the technologies and we need to diversify the geographies that those technologies are implemented.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think while listening to the oil and gas side of things, I think it's quite interesting to see how there could be so much overlap between these two industries. Talking about construction in my side here, and I think this first question would be more for you, Sameh, as well. But as a developer in the region, in Ras Al Khaimah in particular, how do you foresee some of the goals and commitments of the COP kind of impacting the UAE construction sector? And is it in terms of carbon financing, as they've mentioned, or is there some other ways that we can do this?
COP will provide the framework that's needed for the industry to become a lot more conscious of sustainability and a lot more caring about implementing measures that would help with sustainability and climate protection. We are, as an industry, we're responsible for 39% of the emissions worldwide. So whether it's production of cement or production of steel on the manufacturing end of things, that's a massive contributor. Our part as a developer is to identify what can we do on our end to assist with this journey, the COPE journey and the objectives. And there's a lot to do. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there, the LEDs and the solar panels and so on. But there's, I think, a huge part of it is the culture itself within the organization. You need everybody to be aware of sustainability. We are the custodians in Ras Al Khaimah. We're the custodians of an amazing mangrove sanctuary. And we have flamingos year-round, and we have turtles within our development area. So we have to break it up into smaller segments, and everybody needs to understand how can we contribute, how can we achieve our long-term objectives. So the culture is important. Assessing where we are, benchmarking ourselves to the rest of the industry. So we do that anyway because we're a publicly traded company. We have to report to ADX on an annual basis our sustainability measures. But we've also employed an initiative with S&P that helps us benchmark where we are. Where are we today? Where do we need to get to at the end of the year? Then we need to implement all of these things in our designs. We need to... The most tricky thing for us, I think, is the measurement of the carbon cost. I'm not sure. This is a tricky matter. So, any help that can come in that direction.
I believe that's common across all industries.
Sorry?
How do we measure? I believe that's common across all industries. How do we measure that carbon?
Yes.
How do we measure how much we've captured? How do we measure how much we've produced?
I think the good thing is now that technology is moving towards a specific direction, we are able to kind of assess and find ways in order to make it as accurate as we can. Obviously, we're not getting to the details as of yet, but I think it will get there. And I think with the COP's team this year being all about action rather than just knowing, it's all about action now. I think that would be a great way for people like consultants as well to come into play and to assess how developers or how other industries are kind of using and how they can utilize. So I guess my next question is to you, Ahmed. As a consultant in KEO, what is being done, and do you think what should be done in the region right now to be able to hit those goals that COP has set?
Thanks a lot for this question. Like now, we as a consultant now, we have two perspectives. One, as a corporate itself. So what are our emissions, and we need to reduce our emissions. And in order to achieve our goals, we had our own commitment with the Ministry of Climate Change to reduce our emissions by 35% by 2030. So we as a company itself, we try to reduce our emissions and we commit to reduce this. On the other hand, as a designers, like now, if we have like new building or new infrastructure and we need to design, we need always to balance between the demand and the supply. Now, the other side of the table, like they are speaking about supply, but regarding the demand, do I need really to emit all of this like carbon, like CO2 emissions or like GHG emissions, or I can reduce it? So this is first step that we need to focus on retrofitting, how we can optimize our buildings, how we can increase the efficiency of our buildings until we can see that we cannot offset more or we cannot retrofit more, because otherwise it will impact the business or the operation or even comfort. So this is completely understandable. And then we start to focus on the renewable energy. We try to get more and more renewable energy, and then we start to focus on the carbon credits, or let's focus on the renewable energy certificates and etc. I don't think like we shouldn't start with the certificates, but on the other hand, we need to focus or to have everything in parallel to reduce our emissions. Second, regarding awareness, and this is what we do right now. We need to talk more and more, because when we talk, like we educate ourselves, we educate even our clients, we educate everyone, because maybe this is my area of experience. I know what is scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, but some people, they don't know what is scope 1, what is direct emission, what's indirect emissions, etc. So we need to increase the awareness, and then the emissions will reduce. Even if it will reduce by 1%, 2%, this is more than enough, but at least let's do this. Finally, let's agree, like finally we want profit. We want to construct because like we need to make, like we have our own profits, companies, etc. This is completely understandable. I'm not against this. So when we try to construct, let's focus a lot how we can think like after 5 years, after 10 years. When we retrofit this building, it will be applicable. So when let's say if I want to consider system, and this system maybe it is expensive, the technology, it will not be available, but at least let's try to have the infrastructure. Then after 5 years, 10 years, the client, when we want to retrofit their own building, it will be easy. Because sometimes we want to retrofit and we see the opportunity, but we cannot implement, because due to like different reasons. So we as a designers, we try to make sure that our building can be retrofitted after 5 years. And this is always in my head, like when I design building regarding energy, etc. Yes, I try to reduce my emissions now, but after 5 years or 10 years, I make it easy for whoever will come after me and to try to optimize the buildings itself.
Yeah, I think essentially the whole idea is to future-proof cities and to future-proof buildings.
It is all like, as we discussed right now, like we are not enemies. And we are not trying to catch opportunity. Like let's all of us talk together, because if tomorrow we say we don't want oil and gas, we will shut off everything. We will not have electricity. Like let's be realistic here. And if we say we will have renewable energy, then after 5-10 years we will have issue with the waste. Like all of these panels, we will need to later on. Then we will have issue with the electronic waste. So it is more about like discussions and carbon counting. Exactly, collaboration and like transparency. We talk, we try to find solutions and to move forward.
Right, of course. Paul, this is a question for you specifically, since we've started talking about future-proofing and finding a middle ground. But how do you think you can, as someone from Omnium who addresses client needs, what are some of the challenges that you face on a daily, to explain the idea of green building and sustainability to your clients?
Often challenges come in the way of value engineering. All clients want to value engineer, and value engineering has become a very bad term, I believe. It's normally taking money out of a building. And value engineering can mean putting value back into a building. designing for the future, designing for modular construction that can be reused. You can take it apart. I think we miss an opportunity here to actually advance our overall cause in terms of reducing overall carbon emissions by not implementing simple things in construction. Simple things we can do today make things able to take apart. If you're able to take a building apart in future, it means you can reuse it. It means you can take walls down, reuse them, reuse your stacks, reuse everything in the building, which we don't value engineer. We're not putting value back into the building today. We're taking value out. We're also focusing on things you were asking about measurement of carbon. There is, the International Construction Measurement Standard exists. Number 3 has just been published, which in theory, we haven't done it yet, but in theory you should be able to take it, list all your materials and come up with your carbon cost at the end of the day. And we believe, and in Omnium we're investing heavily in it, to ensure that at some stage we can offer that as we give a cost for a building, we give your carbon emission for the same building. And then that'll make it easier for us to value engineer this building going forward. So we can put the value back in where we need to, because we know in future if we change something, that material, which happens a lot today, it's the waste. It's the waste. Construction, it's about the waste, 40%. 40%. We contribute 40% of the entire world's greenhouse gas. And we're not careful enough with what we do, because we knock down a building and we throw away half the stuff. Instead of designing so that we can take that window, take that door, take that floor. The floor is not a great example, but take the components out and we reuse them. Reuse them somewhere else. Then the carbon's not gone. It's not in a landfill. It's in a new building for people going forward could be the next generation, you know. We can't also be short-sighted about today making decisions to save money and time today, or even to save carbon today, when we know, exactly as Ahmed was saying, we save money today or carbon today, but in 10 years' time we have to re-expend that same carbon to redo the building, whereas if you design it as KEO wants to, you can just retrofit the building. You don't have to redo the building.
That's a really good point right there. From your side, how does it kind of like fit in with the renewable energies, I guess?
In my mind, and maybe I think about this wrong, so a few things about what we just talked about, right? On the one hand, awareness is huge. We feel it in the same way, right? To us, for instance, we think about renewable energy, and everybody's like, let's put a lot of solar panels and create utility scale PV. Well, that's been the petard that's hoisting us recently, right? To some extent, now we need an inordinate amount of lithium. Where are we going to get that from? And if you don't want lithium to explode, you need to add cobalt to it, where does that come from? Supply chain is a big part, and being conscious of the supply chains that we are creating by what we're doing is important, right? And that's where you have to be thinking ahead of time. To some extent, a lot of these energy transition technologies are democratizing in a way, right? Anybody with an idea can actually come up with a new way of doing something. And this is why you have such a growing venture kind of environment in the US, coming up with new technologies, new ideas here, everywhere in the world, frankly. But the key is, to some extent, awareness and not having central decision making, or governments, if you will, picking winners and losers, right? You gotta put yourself in a position where you let some of these things grow and foster without the burdens of having to be big to get, because otherwise you're just getting to the same point. I think the measurement side is super interesting. I was just in the Dubai Air Show, and all airlines were talking about, we're not exactly sure how to calculate this stuff, right? Everybody has the same issue. We've made investments into emissions measuring platforms because we feel in the oil field we're in the same spot. We don't know what's out there, we don't know what's out there. We don't know how to calculate its removal. We don't know where to go from here. That's an issue. And it's an issue when you have a system of whack-a-moles. Like, it's you kill one problem, but you're opening more, and that's concerning, right? So to your point, I think it takes a lot of us to have these discussions, right? Because you all sometimes don't see the supply side of things, of how this is getting created, how this energy is coming together, what are the things that we're doing. Why does geothermal make sense, right? To us, like we've made pretty significant investment in geothermal energy. To us, the sun is 96 million miles away. We have basically unlimited energy, 6 miles deep. We just need to figure out how to get there efficiently and practically, right? How do we change the way we store energy to avoid the supply issues around mining and lithium and all of that comes attached to it? What are potential solutions? How do we reduce the need for storage, right? Maybe it's not by using only wind and PV. Maybe there's other things we can add to the mix. How do we think about synthetic fuels, e-fuels, e-SAF, hydrogen? What can we be doing on our side to be helpful as you all think about how do you build? How do you construct this new society, right? To some extent, we are growing massively. Humanity is growing, we're growing, Middle East is growing. That's why we're all here, right? There's a lot of potential opportunity there, but there's a lot of energy need, which comes attached to a lot of potential carbon and methane and all sorts of NOx. How do we work together to solve the problem, right?
Yes. Of course, regardless of the industry, renewable energy matters. It's our best bet right now. The demand for energy is growing, and we have the resources. We just need to know how actually we can use these resources more efficiently. So I understand the scarcity of the resources, but you know what they say, necessity is the mother of all inventions, and we will figure it out. Now we know that lithium is scarce and the waste is a problem. The industry is focusing on sodium-based batteries and how we can make them as efficient as the lithium-based batteries. So the questions are there, but so are the answers. So we need to focus on a good narrative, a positive narrative about it. And in terms of reduction and strategies, especially by construction industry or any other industry, the motto is always measure, reduce, offset. So we need to start measuring, and we did, and we have been measuring the GHG inventories of different industries for the past 10 years. It started with Scope 1 and 2 emissions, that was the demand, but now we need to focus on Scope 3 emissions. And I understand the challenge because for different industries, from retail to food and beverage to financial institutions, we have worked with different corporates, and it's quite challenging because of lack of data and the methodologies that actually lead us to those calculations. But we are learning, and the learning curve is very steep. We are learning from the industries, and the industries are learning from us. The more there is data in the industry, we are actually doing more robust calculations, estimations of GHG inventories. And I think we are going to get to a good level of GHG inventarization, especially with construction and energy in the next couple of years, including Scope 3 emissions. And then we need to think about simultaneously how we can reduce these emissions. What are the technologies? What are the practices? It's very interesting to see that even sometimes behavioral changes lead to good emission reduction. So how we can adopt those behavioral changes. And of course, the third part is after the behavioral changes and other technologies that help the industries to reduce their emissions is offsetting, which is a quite controversial issue. So it's a polluter pays principle. Does it mean that it gives the polluter to pollute as much as they can? No, that's not the thing. The principle is that reduce as much as you can, but then there will always be residual emissions. And we need good quality carbon credits for that, because if a company, a corporate aims at net zero, they'll always need good quality carbon removal credits. And we need to focus on technologies that provide those credits, those emission reduction credits from, of course, to start with nature-based solutions. That's our best bet for carbon removal technologies, but the carbon capturing and storage and other removal technologies are like engineered direct air capturing. They are actually advancing quite fast, so we need to see how we can also invest in those technologies, because we all know that to reach the goals of Paris Agreement, net zero is the key, and that actually requires action on reduction as much as action on offsetting of the residual emissions.
Right, right. Dean, I'm actually quite curious about what questions you would have from the construction side of things coming from an oil and gas perspective.
Well, I'm going to take a look at it this way and say that we break up both industries into various parts, like the start, the initial design, construction, handoff. All industries don't look long-term. We're always oil and gas does a little bit more long-term thinking, especially on the exploration side of the business. But in construction, we're looking short-term handoff, get new management in to manage the whole building complex. Then the building's forgotten about and run over years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, we have to retrofit the building. The original building contractor is no longer there. What happens? How do we change our mentality, our financing of projects, rather than thinking short-term, like we need to get this return on investment in 5 years, think of it long-term. Let's put in oil and gas, let's put in more investment in upfront, knowing that over 20 years, 25 years, we get this. Could we not do the same also in construction? Invest more into what we're doing with solar power or with renewables and look at the long-term return. The initial cost is expensive in putting in a lot of these new technologies, which becomes cost prohibitive. And this all goes back into the whole financing. How do we encourage this financing? How do companies come up with their return on investment over time? Do we have to look at our whole financial models and say they're not working? Do we have to look long-term of how do we adjust these models? And that applies to both industries equally, I do believe.
For sure, in our field where you're talking about long-term, it's assets that we would hold. So something like hospitality, where when we build a hotel or we're building to lease versus sell, there's different dynamics. With hospitality, for example, we're seeing more and more sustainability ratings. So when you book, you look at the sustainability, is it a 2-star or a 3-star sustainable property? We're making sure that in our future designs, we design to LEED standards, sustainable standards on the hospitality front, efficiencies in utilization of water, more efficient components, electromechanical components. So this is important. There's a lot to do. There are small measures, but small measures do add up, and we have to take it into account from start to end, the entire cycle, design, the actual construction, and then the operation and maintenance of the facilities.
And then possible retrofitting or
absolutely
shutting down the building totally and rebuilding.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm sorry. You can only get a building to be self-sustainable and renewable. Is the industry, and this is just I'm just ignorant about this, is the industry working to potentially also extend that renewability or sustainability of a building into the greater the municipality? Meaning, there may be technologies or ideas where a building can only get to zero, right? But to the extent that there is excess capacity of sustainability, put in a, I guess, philosophical way, it be transferred into the broader good. So
what you're saying, let's take the geothermal side or the solar power side. Okay, you have this excess energy generated. Can you feed that back into the grid?
Not yet.
Can we do that?
But it's done.
It's done. It's been done elsewhere.
Exists.
The technology does
absolutely.
exist.
And it's a great idea.
So does this push to do that? Does that come from the government level, or does that come from industries taking it on themselves?
It has to be collaborative. We have to work very closely with the regulators, with the government, with the power companies, with the utility providers. So there's a lot of work that's required by everyone. We don't produce that much energy that we can put back as real estate, but potentially I'm sure there's other industries that would.
regarding the idea of net metering, yes, it is applicable and it is happening. Very, very few buildings, but let's say DO headquarters now, it is under construction, it is net zero building, and it is mainly based on the PV. And PV, it is like sunlight. So of course it is feeding the the grid like during like daytime.
We also have
and
that
then
green
they
city
consume.
here, don't we, here in Dubai? That green city?
Yeah, here in Al Jaddaf, like the
Sustainable city.
and sustainable city for sure. Like this is also another example. So yes, net metering is like idea is applicable, and it sometimes you can achieve it, but it's of course it's expensive and it requires a lot of, let's say, PV panels, batteries, and infrastructure cabling, etc. So it is a bit challenge here. But regarding like here responsibility, like who is responsible? Do I need to go as a corporate and to go to the government and tell the government, please, like make the emission factor of the grid zero, so I will be net zero? This can be done, but then I move the responsibility from my from mine to the government, and I will ask the government to do everything, which I don't see the right to use things like let's say like again like emission, let's say coal or whatever, and then we ask the corporates to completely offset like their emissions. It is finally it's collaboration. So as a country wise, as we hear in UAE, they have major like mega like solar power plants, so they decarbonize the grid itself towards net zero. And on the other hand, me as a corporate, I emit certain like carbon emissions. I'm responsible for this. Like I need to find a way to offset these emissions. This is a thing that we need to take the responsibility of it, and we try to offset it. Here it will take us to regarding the carbon counting. Yes, carbon counting regarding how to measure. There is like GHG protocol, you have science-based targets, and now I understand maybe it is not 100% mature, but like 2010, like when we were speaking about LEED and sustainability, it wasn't mature. Now it is by default easily you can get LEED silver, LEED gold, and LEED platinum. Like I would say more than 50% of the LEED projects as a KO doing LEED platinum. So we have now the know-how. So I believe within the carbon knowledge, within like 5 years, the knowledge will be here. And this will take us regarding the value engineering. Regarding value engineering, and this is now shifting the mindset. Value engineering at the beginning, it was regarding how to reduce the cost. But now it is not only cost, how to invest like the client's money in the right way. Let's say if I want to have very thick insulation, like to reduce my like heat gain, whatever, for cooling, because like cooling is the major contribution. Do I need really to increase all of this? Maybe I can reduce it a bit, but the contribution will be 0.01% difference. On the other hand, I can invest, let's say, in the chillers, in the air conditioning, because of the lifetime, or let's say lighting. The lifetime of the lamp is 5 years, so it can be replaced. So you can be like, if you want to have limited budget, you can invest in equipment that the lifetime of it like 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, and you can start to maybe, if you have limited budget, to start to optimize or to compromise with things that it can be changed within like 3 years, 4 years, and it will be easily to be changed. So I don't want always like to say, no, we want this, we want this. It is more as a collaboration with value engineering, because we have this a lot with our clients and with the cost consultants. We start to give them parametric analysis. We give them, let's say, 10 options regarding all insulation of the building, regarding all of the HVAC system. And they start to tell them, this is the advantage, the disadvantages, and we recommend X, Y, Z, and we start to see what is the right solution. It is finally whole building simulation. It is not one element, it is not one sector, and we try to focus a lot. It is not by book. Each building has its own signature and its own like function or operation, and we need to think how to reduce the overall emissions within the limitation that we have.
So what you're talking about almost is kind of like a digital twin of the building being built, and that calls into play as well with safe fuels, engines, and stuff like that within the oil and gas industry. The digital twin idea of basically modeling what's going on, the flow, the temperatures, the emissions, the same happens in the construction industry.
Yeah, I think
more and
we
more.
always talk about, tackling the problems at the beginning, at the very beginning, and I think that's exactly what value engineering is about. So I want to hear your thoughts about this, Paul. What do you think about, starting at the very core of it and just...
Well, I think an important point that was raised earlier, it depends on what the client is doing with the building. If you're holding it, it becomes a completely different set of requirements to when you actually selling it on. And I think it's that gap that needs to be reduced. I think there needs to be some sort of step in where if it's being sold on, it should meet similar requirements to if you're holding the building. It doesn't exist in general in the world at the moment. There's no correlation between if you're holding it or if you're selling it. And I think in doing that, you then bring into play you value engineering for the future. You're engineering the building for the future. You're not engineering it to pass it on to somebody else because you bring up the chillers. You can put in a chiller that's going to last you 10 years. You can put in a chiller that's going to last you 25 years. Which is best for the building? Do you take a shortcut earlier on, or do you do it long term? Do you put in the photovoltaic panels? Because at the end of the day, that's long term. You're not, as a developer, necessarily going to recoup that cost immediately, but your tenants are. And it's also about social change, because I know, stepping away a bit from construction, if you convince and if you put the message out there properly, people will pay more for something they know it's going to save them money and time.
I think it's that inevitable.
Yes, it's that education. You've got to educate people and say, well, today you're going to pay wrapper launching a new property and you're going to pay an extra 5-10% for it. But we can demonstrate, proven, that we're going to save you 20% off your bills per month for the next 20 years. Oh, you'll buy that, I'll buy that, any of us will buy that. So it's part of that as well, the message that we need to get through. And then we can build these buildings for the future. We can build it with the best technologies available, photovoltaic, energy reduction, because it has to go hand in hand. I mean, we need the oil in the ground. There's no getting away from it. We have to use it. No, otherwise we're going to end up back in the dark age. Right now, today, we need to. But then it's everything together. And it's about taking all of our abilities, putting it together and coming up with the best solution, the best value engineered solution for the future, for that building, taking everything into account and scenario planning it. Scenario planning, saying, well, in 20 years' time, let's sit today and say, what's that building going to be like in 20 years' time? We often look, well, what's the building going to be like in 10 years' time? What's the building going to be like in 20 years' time? Where's our energy going to come from? Can we reduce the energy consumption in the building in future if we have to? Look, there's already been massive steps. I mean, we've got similar buildings that have gone from 30 megawatt to 20 megawatt. Same building, 10 years apart. One's using 20 megawatt, the previous used 30 megawatt. So it's a massive change already. So it is happening.
It's very interesting because now with some of our designs, AI technology is being used, and it's just the simple orientation of buildings, the size of glass, etc. It gives us what is the most efficient unit, comparing the differences. And
we've got the tools.
Like I said, there's a lot to do. It's just awareness and education.
Is it awareness? How do you get your organizations to think about trying new things, piloting new things, knowing that sometimes I don't want to get in trouble with the boss? If I try something new, it's going to take 5 years to know if it worked, if it actually produced positive change, and I know that I have a budget to hit this. How do you marry those two? You see what I'm saying? I feel like a lot of times we put our organizations in the situation where it's a lose-lose proposition. If it goes well, I don't get the benefit of it. If it goes bad, I'm the first one that people... How do you allow people to take a little bit of risk and try new things out?
Well, I think there's a famous CEO who recently made a comment that you've got to let people make mistakes. You actually have to let them and be safe in making mistakes, because unless you're making mistakes, unless you're trying new things, you're not going to make mistakes. If you're doing it by the book all the time, and you've got to encourage your whole organization to look at bringing up new ideas. Take it to the CEO. Take him the new ideas, and there needs to be a forum, though, to allow that to happen, because you don't want people knocking on your door every 5 minutes.
No, but
you need to encourage everybody, right down from the guy who's responsible to making sure everybody has a bottle of water on their table, and a new idea he might have, all the way up to your lead designers, your consultants you're paying to come with ideas that you don't want to see what's been done for the last 100 years in our industry. You want to see something new.
But it has to be a top-down and a bottoms-up approach. It's not a matter of bottoms-up people coming in with ideas. I think as leadership, we're responsible for also sending that message out. We need ideas, we need initiatives, examine this, examine that, and setting the right examples for everybody.
I actually would like to spotlight on what both Ahmed and Paul said. Regarding the reduction, in terms of scope 2 emissions, there is a good chance for the building sector, the construction industry, to invest in renewables, both on site. You can have your own rooftop panels, but also there are good examples of companies, especially industrial buildings, investing in solar panels or other renewable energy on a totally different site. If the regulator and the grid allows, you can easily sign offtake agreements. You can even take part in the capital investment of those investments and use the power from there. You don't really need to be connected to that grid source directly, but if the grid allows, you can have your own offtake agreement and still reduce your emissions. And you can also do that with carbon credits, because you can also buy renewable energy credits and reduce your scope 2 emissions. But I think the real trick with the construction business is the scope 3 emissions, because that's cement and steel, both very carbon intensive products. How are you going to convince your vendors, your suppliers, to actually produce less carbon intensive products? That's really the key, because if you inventorize your emissions, you're going to see that the majority of the emissions will come from scope 3 emissions. And it's all about collaborating with your suppliers and making them part of the game, and making sure that they understand your goal in net zero is very important. And actually, it will be a distinctive matter in choosing the suppliers in very near future. And what Paul said in terms of like this narrative, like how you can adopt as a company this policy, the cost of reduction, decarbonization will always be there. And it's also, a matter of decision making. The economies, we know the global economy in what shape it is. Of course, it's a very critical matter. But I think we can flip the coin and change the narrative and focus on the value and the opportunity of decarbonization rather than the cost and risk. So there is good opportunity, because there is good opportunity if you generate carbon credits. There is good opportunity if you actually commit to net zero and diversify your source of financing, because a lot of financial institutions and source of financing will come through green financing. And if you can access that finance by adopting this new narrative of net zero, decarbonizing, and being the key player in climate action, I think it can convince even the key decision makers who are cost sensitive in a company.
Absolutely. I think essentially what we're kind of forgetting sometimes, or I could be wrong, is that at the end of the day, we are selling, especially from a developer's point of view, that we are offering these developments and properties to people who are, people who are willing to invest that much money. So I think the question from my side is, how do we train or upskill our workers to be able to put that point across, not only to potential buyers or potential clients, but also to just contribute to the overall conversation that COP28 is so adamant on explaining, like what is happening internally from your side that is contributing to this.
So one of the things that's ironic is there is no measure of energy efficiencies of units in the UAE, and it's such a simple matter. So one of the initiatives we're taking now, if you buy a unit in Europe, if you buy a unit in the US, there's that grid of red, green, orange. So we don't have a similar measure here. So we're taking the initiative of actually developing that for our properties that we're selling. It tells the buyer, the investor, that this is how much your energy is going to cost you. So that educational element is very important. I think that's one important contribution.
Yeah, it's very simple, but I think it gets
It's
the
a
point
simple
across.
way of doing it. I'm surprised nobody's done it yet, but I think we will move very fast on that front. Yeah.
I think key is education.
Sorry?
Key is education.
Education.
Education of everybody, from junior high, elementary, all the way through to adulthood, and even as we're buying and growing up, like looking at our cell phone, what energy is being used there, the whole process, the education process. And Gediz, you've worked on a lot on the education side of it.
Yes, I mean, being in this business for so many years, especially starting like when there was not really much awareness from many industries in like why we need to reduce our emissions and why the climate goals really matter, we had to collaborate and transfer knowledge and make sure that our solution partners and our stakeholders were in good understanding of these matters. And I think we reached to a good level right now. All industries, all the people we are collaborating with in different industries or in regulators, governments, public offices, they know that, actually, where do we want to live? That's the question. Do we want to live in a world where the temperature increase reached 4 degrees? The global economy shrank like by 40%. There is extreme weather events everywhere. Do we want to live there, or do we want to change the narrative to a low carbon economy and we cap the temperature increase hopefully by 1.5 degrees and we beat the climate change? So this is actually a choice right now. It's a very critical choice, and we need to be we all know where we need to be, on which side of this choice right now. And I think the question is, according to Climate Policy Initiative, actually, the amount of financing needed to be mobilized towards climate mitigation technologies by 2030 is $4.3 trillion annually. That's the number, annually. And unfortunately, only 21% of that finance is mobilized right now. So there is elephant in the room. We all know that we need to take action. We need to reduce. We need to decarbonize as fast as possible. But the financing is not there. So how are we going to finance all these new technologies so we actually reach the goals of Paris Agreement? And of course, carbon pricing is the key. We need to put a price on carbon. What we need the cooperation and collaboration of key industries, and construction is one of them, because you are using the most carbon intensive products in the world. And if you can go back to your suppliers, your stakeholders, saying that this is the deal breaker. The deal breaker is that we need less intensive, carbon intensive, and even net zero products. And how are we going to do that possible? And if you can differentiate your demand going towards less carbon intensive products, that's going to be very, very important. And then there will be a price on carbon, and all the key players in the industry will be adopting low carbon technologies.
Every corporation, I think, needs to budget for sustainability. I think that decision has to be made. So we're setting aside this much for sustainability. We're willing to pay a bit more to get a product that's less polluting, more efficient. I think that would be one of the starting points, the realization that this is our part of the financing component.
And I think it's a matter of looking at business as usual. What is the long-term cost of that business as usual? We know that it's going to be extreme weather events. It's going to be, a hit on the global economy because of the dropping yields of agriculture and, all the catastrophes we hear. We all know that. So how are we going to reflect that on our business and compare it to business as usual and then see what we can change in our business with the best available technologies, but also investing in new technologies and scaling up new technologies. So, which we call a pathway, right? It's a pathway towards 2030, and actually shows a company how much they can reduce with best available technologies. And there's a good potential for that.
Guillermo, can you?
Yeah, I
talk
mean,
about
all I wanted to
technology?
say, I mean, to some extent, right? You gotta choose. This energy transition is probably the largest reallocation of capital in human history. There's too much to decarbonize, too much energy, just by definition. It's gonna take 50 years or 100, I don't know how long it's gonna take. You gotta choose, you be part of it and lead in it, or you don't. You know, we can talk about climate. Yeah, of course, all of this matters, but fundamentally, organizationally, where do you want to be on which side?
You need to have a stance at the end of the day.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think at COP itself, there's going to be a lot of questions that they have to answer, whether or not it's financing or technologies introduced into the industries. There's going to be a lot of different conversations, even tough conversations that have to happen. And I think coming from, even from a younger generation, we are aware, and there are a lot of conversations from not just the construction industry, the oil and gas industry, but fashion is there, retail, and every other aspect of the world is aware. But I think it's important that we're also engaged. There's a difference.
You talk about demographics, actually interesting. I think for the first time in a long time, we have 3 generations. The kids, all about green sustainability, climate, make decisions not on ROI alone, or IRR alone, but actually on, ESG concepts. You have, millennials more into that too, and then you have the next generation actually worried about their grandchildren. So you have actually alignment, right? You have fundamental demographic alignment around 85% of the productive capacity of the planet or something like that. Like everybody kind of wants this. So to some extent, awareness is important, but also education, right? I know I care, I just don't know what to do about it.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Well, it's been a really interesting conversation so far, but let's go ask some personal questions to each of you to see what your point of view and take is. So, Gediz, with your experience in financing, climate financing, what do you see as new mechanisms coming down the road in the financing side?
So, addressing the need for scaling up and mobilizing more finance towards new technologies, of course, putting a price on carbon is like the key instrument right now. And we see that the carbon markets are expanding. There are more mechanisms around the world putting a price on carbon. The carbon tax came to the scene, so that also means putting a price on carbon. And we appreciate all these new mechanisms, either by compliance or voluntary. But we see new vehicles like green bonds and climate bonds, which is like one of the fastest growing green financing vehicle in the world. And actually, that's a good opportunity for construction industry as well. You can easily mobilize finance towards new green buildings or greening of your buildings through green bonds and climate bonds. So that's a very promising fixed income instrument right now. And in terms of other mechanisms, of course, scaling up and fulfilling the need for climate finance is going to take more action. And I think that will be also based on the financial institutions, because it's not only industries going net zero, FIs are going net zero as well, which means that they need to decarbonize all their Scope 3 emissions, which is their loan books. And they will go and opt for investing in new green technologies. And if you can develop those green technologies as construction industry or oil and gas, the new sources of finance from financial institutions in project financing, recourse or non-recourse financing, you'll be eligible to access new financing as well. But to my understanding, and I think that's like every finance person in the world right now knows that, if you do not decarbonize, the chance of getting financing from any resource, any source in the world will be diminishing more and more because, as I said, the financial institutions are also opting for decarbonizing their emissions. So soon enough, they will be really diverting from emission-intensive technologies to green technologies.
How do you find education comes into play? There's a lot of anti-carbon credit, anti-carbon tax coming from part of the West, especially in the oil and gas industry. Like they see it as a tax grab. Okay, the government just wants more tax, and we can't measure this. How do you find education will help in this?
I mean, tax or pricing, carbon credit pricing, they've got both advantages and disadvantages. And I think we need to leave that discussion to macroeconomists because they are able to measure the efficiency of both tools and see what is really best for different economies. Carbon tax is good as long as you can actually create a revolving door that tax revenue can go to new technologies. That's great because with carbon credits, we can assure that the carbon financing goes to new technologies. That's the nature of carbon financing. With carbon tax, it depends on the public investments and the choice of the administrations in how to use that revenue. So it of course requires transparency and accountability. So that's one question. But in terms of debate, like if we need to put a price on carbon, I don't know how we can solve the climate problem without putting a price on carbon. It's actually just a basic economic theory. Everything that has a value in the world, it's got a price, right? If there's a value, there's a price. I mean, you can negotiate, you can actually debate the value of a product, but if it's got a value, it's got to have a price. There's only one commodity, one asset, let's say, that doesn't have any price despite its enormous value. It's the ecosystem services. So I think the real failure right now is despite the value of ecosystem services, we are not able to put a price on them. And if you don't put a price on that, you know what happens. So this is the question, and I think the answer is very clear. One way or another, we need to put a price on carbon, either as tax or carbon credits. And actually the expansion of the carbon markets and the adoption of more carbon tax in different jurisdictions shows us that there is good interest in that.
Okay, thank you. Guillermo, let's take a look at tech. How do we measure this carbon? How do we do this? How are you doing it with the Nabors? And
We've made some investments into emissions measurement.
is there a lost leader approach as well to this, or is it?
I wouldn't say a lot. I mean, look, we're frankly more focused on investing in the technologies that would allow us to measure. You know, that's all we can do. And we have made some investments in some emissions measuring platforms, data service type of sensors and software on that. And that's part of our job, right? To try to see if we can use this to deploy in the oil field to try to understand what we're doing and how to reduce what we're doing. We are focused primarily, really, and that'll take its turn. I think we're primarily focused in helping our companies and our investments and our portfolio go from idea and pilot, or TRL 6-ish, call it, all systems tested independently, to first of a kind, second of a kind, demonstration, reference project. How do you figure out a way to bring capital to those? There's almost unlimited capital once you're, no engineering risk. This has been tried, tested, true, etc. But part of what we're fighting in this whole energy transition is we need new technologies, right? Things need to get tried, and it costs money to try them. And it takes somebody to stick their neck out. It's not just the government, right? It just takes somebody to stick their neck out and be like, this makes sense, we'll figure this out.
So the question is, like, how do you maintain your profitability? You're going from drilling oil wells to geothermal wells. Yes, in theory, the well. But how do you make money off the geothermal and maintain your own profitability?
Correct. That's the balance, right? That's the line you always have to be thinking about. Are we a drilling company or are we a technology company? And if we are a energy technology company, what are the early stage investments we're making today so that we have a business tomorrow, so we can grow through and look, if we invest into geothermal drilling technology, well, if geothermal becomes a thing, which in my mind it should, there is 50,000 times more energy than all fossil fuels put together in the form of heat, right? Because the Earth is too big. I think only 1% of the volume of the planet is colder than 1,000 Celsius. So there is a lot of energy. If we're investing in these energy technology companies, does it provide us with an opportunity to repurpose some of our fleet to start thinking about how to do this, right? And does that give us a path to growth over time? If we are investing in concentrated solar power, does that put us in the sustainable aviation or hydrogen path? Does that give us an opportunity to think about why hydrogen and drilling for hydrogen? Does that give us an opportunity to deploy robotics for cleaning some of these mirrors, or automation, or frankly, we have remote operations, remote controls. We have a cloud that basically manages our entire fleet, remotely and from Houston. Does that give us opportunity to deploy this cloud for other uses other than just our own fleet and our own oil and gas drilling? That's the balance we gotta play. And to your point, it's long term, right? You gotta put the money now. You gotta think about investing some of this hard-earned money.
And that hard-earned money can be invested in smaller companies and their
Correct.
mergers, and looking at the cloud, going more towards the tech side of it.
Absolutely.
And that's the way you see Nabors growing.
Correct.
Into this energy transition.
Correct. That's exactly the way. That's the approach we've taken. Our job is not to screw it up, right? Not to choose wrong. Hopefully we don't.
But you'll make mistakes along the way.
That is the game
It
changer,
happens.
right? That the game changer here is the carbon price, because when there is a price on carbon, all your return on investment calculations will change, because now you're actually looking at, from a conventional point of view, what is the return, what is the revenue from this investment. But if there is a price on carbon, your perspective of profitability will change eventually and dramatically. But of course, there are good sides and other side. There's another side of the coin. Like you said, the geothermal, for instance. When we look at most of the geothermal investments around the world, unfortunately, during the drilling, the amount of carbon dioxide that is coming out of the earth is more than the renewable energy generated by the plant. So then you need to invest also in carbon capturing and storage if you want to invest in that geothermal plant, because you want to have zero emission energy. So it's a very complex question. And of course, for oil and gas industry, as I said, it's just internalizing the price of carbon and making choices based on that pricing.
And I think the oil and gas industry is changing more from oil and gas into energy as a whole. How
Of course, yeah.
produce energy.
Exactly, produce
And
energy.
then that energy feeds into the construction side of the business.
If you think, sorry, last thing I'll say on this. If you think about our energy mix, right? We use about 20 terawatts of power in the world, and solar, nuclear, and wind produce about 2. And they've had about 40 years to develop themselves into the most efficient wind and solar farms and PV farms, whatever that may be. The traditional energy complex is providing the other 18, and it's fighting its own natural decline. So by definition, our participation as an industry, oil and gas industry, into helping to decarbonize and provide energy in scale, we gotta be part of this, right? It's gotta be centralized around the companies that have been providing energy to the world for the last 150 years, right? But it just so happens to be.
Yeah, there's big stakes, but I think at the end of the day, it's all about, again, collaboration, where everything just
correct.
comes in together. I think this is for you, Ahmed and Paul, but we're in a region that's specifically very adaptive to change. The UAE is adapting to change quicker than any other, I'd say, Middle Eastern city. So in your opinion, what is your stance on knowledge sharing with other countries to be able to, again, since technology is a running team with all industries, what is being done to kind of share some knowledge or gain knowledge from other players in the world?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's going out there and seeing what's new, going out there and seeing what's new in the market. The unfortunate thing with our industry, it's stagnated for many years. We've got these great new technologies, the modularization. We can build in modules. You can take it to site. You can put it down. Less labor intensive, less waste. But it hasn't taken off like we thought it would 20 years ago when it first sort of came to the fore. They do it in certain parts of the world. China comes to mind. They do it there, and they do it very successfully there. But it's not quite something that's taken off here. And I think we've got to admit that we need to look everywhere and see how the building's done. Look into Africa, see how they build in Africa, very efficiently, very at one with nature. We're building. I mean, we don't only work here. We work in Saudi Arabia as well. And there, some of our projects, they're looking at using traditional adobe bricks. So it's using all of that. Oh, they really are. They're going to use adobe clay bricks. It's a clay brick. It's very efficient. It comes from the earth. It's easy to make. You can actually make it without the power that you need to go and produce cement. So you don't have that cement cost. Whether it's right for a city like Dubai, where there aren't big clay deposits, it's not right. You have to look at different things. You have to take what suits the country and then implement it in that country. What Dubai can offer, what the UAE can offer is we have lived here in this harsh climate for hundreds of years. The technologies here are suited for the climate that we think is coming. Okay, so desalination. I mean, countries shouldn't have a water shortage problem. We can desalinate. We've got the sea. We can desalinate from it. It's all of our water here. Well, 90. I'm not quite sure. That's like 99% comes from desalination. We're doing it for how many years? It truly, the UAE and the other Middle Eastern countries can be an example of how you can use technology to make sure human habitation is possible in a very harsh environment. And I think it's also that feeding of the knowledge back to the world that's so important as well. You know, we can do it. You can. We've developed the conditioned environment that we can live here, completely opposite to Europe. Here we have a heat problem. Europe has a cold problem. Here we've learned how, and it does get more and more efficient. I mean, it's imparting that information between the countries, between the knowledge, between the officers even. Because certain things can translate, certain things can't translate across the from one climate to another. And I certainly believe that we're here placed, and hopefully, I mean, COP28 will hopefully bring more of this together, where we can learn from everybody in the market about how to do things, about what is possible, what is feasible for the future as well.
Interesting. I think at the end of the day, we also have to look at how we can also, you've mentioned it, how we can bring back and give back knowledge to the rest of the world. I think the next question for you, Ahmed, is about, since I know KEO also focuses on design, what can be done on that front to be able to collaborate with, let's say, developers to kind of make a connected city, a walkable city, which I know the UAE has been trying to create for the longest time. What is being done? What do you think needs to be talked about at the COP?
Thanks a lot for this question. Now, as a KEO or as a consultant, we try to break down things. So we try to understand we have sustainability and we have energy. And regarding sustainability, what are the pillars, and let's say resilience, like comfort and like nice areas to walk and to feel comfortable as a human being. So this is something we discuss it. So when we develop any infrastructure, we always, even from my side, with my team, we try to do outdoor comfort condition, how to provide shading, how to provide trees, etc. So we can provide, not here I'm not speaking about energy, but more about comfort and to enjoy living in the city itself. And
sustainability doesn't have to be.
exactly, and to be smart city. Look, smart city is always like regarding like monitoring, controlling, and regarding data. So when you are measuring anything and you have the capability to keep this measurement, you will have trends. And once you will have trend, you will start to correlate between the behavior of whatever, let's say, energy consumption and the other variables. And then you will start to say, if I change the 1, 2, 3, maybe I will reduce. So this F condition, and this F condition, it comes with the AI and it comes with energy modeling and digital twin, etc. So this is something we are working on it a lot in order to improve the operation, because finally you can have the, let's say, best car, but if you are not using it correctly, then you will still consume, even if it is very efficient car. It is amazing. So it is always regarding data, how to utilize data in order to design and in order to operate the facility correctly. On the other hand, regarding the energy or carbon, we have two elements here regarding construction: embedded carbon and operational carbon. So regarding embedded carbon, we need, for each and every material, we need to know what is the embedded carbon here and how to reduce it. So when we go to the client to tell them, okay, in order to construct this, let's say for cement, you have like type 1, type 2, type 3, and each one of them has this carbon tag. So, and we start here the element of the NGOs, or similar to Green Building Council regarding authorities. We have Istidama in Abu Dhabi, we have Green Building here, authorities in Dubai municipality, and to start to tell them the authority saying X. So this is by default, this is the minimum that you need to achieve. But we see that we need to take extra level, and instead of reduce it, let's say by 20%, let's make it 50%, etc. So we try to do this to educate our clients and to start to tell them these are the options and how to reduce your embedded carbon, because embedded carbon, it is a lot and almost like once lifetime, because once you construct the building, the embedded carbon here in cement or steel, etc. And then regarding operational carbon, as I mentioned before, how to design the building efficiently, like how to, for each and every element, like when you do the end use analysis, when you check your carbon emissions from lighting, from cooling, from each and every element, what are the options, and always they give option 1, option 2, option 3, and these are the advantages, disadvantages, and how to be implemented. Even if it will not be implemented now, we need to keep in our mind there is decarbonization plan, as it's mentioned. Maybe after 5 years, 10 years, this will be implemented because the building will be under operation, and there is budget for this. So we need to consider this, and this will take us to the policies and the operation and maintenance manuals. It is not just like huge documents in the facility management, like manager or the team, and no one is looking to it. We need always to take these documents and to make it live, and the people really to use this in order to reduce their operational carbon. So once we reduce both of them and to connect it to proper decarbonization plan for like until 2040 or 2050, then we will reach the net zero, because we will know at this year we will need to reduce our emissions by X%. By that year, we will need to have renewable energy, or we need to invest in renewable energy certificate, or we need to consider retrofitting. And we have low-hanging fruit like energy conservation measures, that the payback, to have the full picture from the design, not after we complete the design and everything and building under operation, and then we get like surprised. Oh, we need really to reduce like it cannot be like this.
Yeah, look, I think we have a unique advantage in the UAE that the government is quite very supportive with the year of sustainability happening throughout 2023 and closing the year with COP. I think we're in a good position.
To add here quickly, like just in 1 minute, like regarding Istidama, let's say Istidama, this is the green certification in Abu Dhabi. I would say more than 70% of projects with GEO, it is Istidama Pearl 3, and this is like very good in that rating. Even sometimes it like our contract, our requirements is still like Pearl 1 or Pearl 2, and from our side we uplifting without any additional cost just to improve it. And sometimes even from energy point of view, we try to implement certain measures. It is not only driven by the authority requirements, but really vision. Like we have, like we feel the responsibility regarding LEED, and this is under Green Building US like Green Building Council, and I would say more than 50% of the project we have is LEED Platinum, and good portion of it's net zero. So it is completely 100% zero emissions. So really, there is coming more and more the net zero buildings and like really good certified buildings. So it is, I believe within like, I think during COP28 and like in 2024, like we will see more and more buildings operated with zero emissions.
Yeah, we're in the right path for sure. Sameh, so as you know, the biggest developer in Ras Al Khaimah, Ras Al Khaimah is positioned in a way where it is a hub now for tourists. Even coming from Dubai or Abu Dhabi, I think Ras Al Khaimah is becoming more of a hub for different people internationally and locally. But how are you pioneering sustainability as a developer, building buildings for a town or a city that is very much young? How is it happening?
Yeah, it's at its infancy. There's two issues. First, you've got actually Ras Al Khaimah is the nature emirate, if you want to think of it. It's real, you know, the mangroves, the sea, the mountains, and so on. So the nature, one of the obligations, one of the responsibilities that we have is how do you preserve that? So we are taking many initiatives on protecting the environment, offset programs, planting corals, counting the number of trees, nurseries for additional mangroves, etc., etc. So the protection is one aspect of it. The other aspect is obviously what are we bringing to the table. So very closely to what Ahmed mentioned, all of our future designs have to incorporate the highest sustainability measures, whether it's LEED, Istidama, Virgil. I think that's a given, no question about it. But then there's also the operational aspect of things. So simple things, our fleets are now electric, even the diesel generators at the construction sites, we're changing those with battery containers. So we get a container. At the end of the week, we take that away, we bring another container, so there's no noise, there's no pollution, there's no carbon production, at least on our end of things. So, you know, it's a long list of things that we can do. Again, it's very small, but we need to focus on education, we need to focus on creating the culture and taking every step that we can as a developer, taking a lead in being the sustainable developer in Ras Al Khaimah.
Perfect. I think you wrapped that up very nicely. Any last words from anyone? And how are you guys feeling about the COP28? What are you excited about for COP28? If anyone wants to share before we end.
Bringing everybody here. This is a great country, and there's a lot of opportunity here. And I wish more and more people see it, right? So, just exciting.
Perfect. Thank you so much, gentlemen, ladies. I think it was a really good conversation, and I think we've all learned from each other from two different industries. Anything else to say, Dean?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we do appreciate you taking your
Thanks
time
for
out on your
inviting
busy
us.
days.
Of course, of course. We'll see you guys at the COP.
See you at COP.
See you. Thank you so much.